have a quorum. We are missing Rachel Morris and Tim McLaughlin, but maybe they'll join us shortly. I haven't heard anything from them about a planned absence. I don't believe there's any adjustments. Is that right, Daniel?
That's
Okay. Next is to approve the minutes of the October 9th meeting.
So moved.
Second. Any changes, issues with the agenda? All in favor? Abstentions? Okay. So. Danielle, do you have 401?
I
Yeah,
have
I said before 401.
401, I do, yeah.
This abstention's on the end.
Audience with the public, does anybody that's here tonight want to add anything to the meeting? No, big no's. Okay. We don't have any action items. So our other item is our presentation with our principal here at Warren.
All right. So I'm Justin Kangas, principal here at Warren. This is my, I think, 13th year. Warren, a few years ago, we started kind of asking the question, what is school and what is it for? What's its purpose? Once upon a time, the purpose of school was to kind of invest in kids as much information as possible, because information was kind of a commodity. So the more information you could retain in your head, the more valuable you could be as a member of society. With the onslaught of technological shifts over the last 50 years, that has shifted. And so all the information you need is out there for whatever it is you want to learn. So then the question is, like, what is our purpose and what is our job moving forward in education? And what makes the biggest difference to kids? In the real world. I always like to tell my story from when I was a kid and kind of like what drove me to be the educator I am. I'm going to shut that door real quick. So growing up, I grew up in the age where there's a really big kick. Every kid, was being sold this idea that, like, if you go to college, life will be made. You'll never have to worry about anything. And so it was very big. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I took that right to heart as a kid, and I busted my butt, and I was miserable in school, but I got second in my class, bunch of scholarships, went to college, and realized that it was all kind of I wasted a lot of time in school, obsessing about things that really didn't matter. And my ability to empathize and be curious was gone. There were actually many years, because of how much effort I put into school and the emphasis I put on it, and I stopped reading. Because I just got tired of being forced to read things I didn't like reading, and so I just stopped reading entirely. And so a few years ago we looked at the values, and like I'm very big on, a lot of schools when they take on PBS, it's like respect, responsibility, and safety. It's very kind of like, and it doesn't really mean anything to the kids, and it doesn't really mean anything to what the school wants to do, and so we wanted to come up with values that meant something to the kids and to us, and that are meaningful. And so we want to keep kids curious, because I think too often school is actually the epitome of what drives curiosity out of people. And so like how can we, so when we're trying to make decisions for the school, we're always trying to think of how does this help us keep kids curious? And how do we instill empathy in our kids so that we can generate a community at the school? And how do we make sure that kids understand basic responsibility, so that when they get out into the real world, they understand kind of like there's some things you have to do even though you may not necessarily want to do them. So some of the things I want to touch upon tonight, we're playing around with a new math program called Illustrative Math, and kind of we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like and why we have chosen to pilot that. There's something that my kindergarten teachers recently, I went to them to a 2-day conference called the Mainly Play Lab, so we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll touch briefly on Savas. It's not going to be an emphasis on kind of what I talk about tonight, because I think there's been a lot of that over the last couple of years, and I think people are more familiar with that than the other things I want to talk about. And I think in education, it's important to, have a balanced kind of meal for kids to ingest. And so one of the things that we've also done is that, I'm really proud of is, we have daily science for an hour in grades 3 through 6. When I first got here, science was taught maybe 40 minutes a week. We're also working on weaving in social studies, but one thing at a time into the schedule, and so that's something I want to talk about. What does that look like? What has that done for kids? And how does that also help emphasize kind of our values of curiosity, empathy, and responsibility? And then passion projects is something that we have instituted ever since COVID. It's an idea that I got during COVID, and I can talk a little more about that when I get there, and so what are passion projects. And then more recently, I'm rebooting our, right before COVID, I got trained as a trainer for restorative practices, that had a huge impact on me. And I want to talk a little bit about that. We've had several staff now get trained in restorative practices, and are starting to use that slowly and integrate that. I'm working on getting training for the whole staff. And then regulated classroom is another training I went to recently with some many staff in my building, and it's been awesome, so I want to share some of that with you guys. So, and I got lots and lots of pictures as well. But before we get into that, I wanted to I thought these two videos did a really nice job of kind of encapsulating kind of what we are trying to accomplish, and kind of what I try to bring to the school as a leader. And so I wanted to talk about, show you guys these real quick.
Albert Einstein once said, everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today on trial we have modern day schooling. Glad you could come. Not only does he make fish climb trees, but also makes them climb down and do a 10-mile run. Tell me, school, are you proud of the things you've done? Turning millions of people into robots, do you find that fun? Do you realize how many kids relate to that fish swimming upstream in class, never finding their gifts, thinking they are stupid, believing they are useless? Well, the time has come, no more excuses. I call school to the stand and accuse him of killing creativity, individuality, and being intellectually abusive. He's an ancient institution that has outlived his usage. So, Your Honor, this concludes my opening statement, and if I may present the evidence of my case, I will prove it. Proceed. Exhibit A. Here's a modern day phone. Recognize it? Here's a phone from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Stay with me. Here's a car from today. And here's a car from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Well, get this. Here's a classroom of today. And here's a class we used 150 years ago. Now ain't that a shame? In literally more than a century, nothing has changed. Yet you claim to prepare students for the future? But with evidence like that, I must ask, do you prepare students for the future or the past? I did a background check on you and let the record show that you were made to train people to work in factories, which explains why you put students in straight rows, nice and neat, tell them sit still, raise your hand if you want to speak, give them a short break to eat, and for 8 hours a day, tell them what to think. Oh, and make them compete to get an A letter which determines product quality, hence grade A of meat. I get it. Back then, times were different. We all have a past. I myself am no Gandhi. But today, we don't need to make robot zombies. The world has progressed. And now we need people who think creatively, innovatively, critically, independently, with the ability to connect. See, every scientist will tell you that no two brains are the same. And every parent with 2 or more children will confirm that claim. So please explain why you treat students like cookie cutter frames or snapback hats, giving them this one-size-fits-all crap.
Watch your language.
Sorry, Your Honor, but if a doctor prescribed the exact same medicine to all of his patients, the results would be tragic. So many people would get sick, yet when it comes to school, this is exactly what happens, this educational malpractice, where one teacher stands in front of 20 kids, each one having different strengths, different needs, different gifts, different dreams, and you teach the same thing the same way? That's horrific. Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant should not be acquitted. This may be one of the worst criminal offenses ever to be committed. And let's mention the way you treat your employees.
Objection overruled. I want to hear this.
It's a shame. I mean, teachers have the most important job on the planet, yet they're underpaid? No wonder so many students are short-changed. Let's be honest, teachers should earn just as much as doctors, because a doctor can do heart surgery and save the life of a kid, but a great teacher can reach the heart of that kid and allow him to truly live. See, teachers are heroes that often get blamed, but they're not the problem. They work in a system without many options or rights. Curriculums are created by policymakers, most of which have never taught a day in their life. Just obsessed with standardized tests. They think bubbling in a multiple choice question will determine success. That's outlandish. In fact, these tests are too cruel to be used and should be abandoned, but don't take my word for it. Take Frederick J. Kelly, the man who invented standardized testing, who said, and I quote, "These tests are too cruel to be used and should be abandoned." Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if we continue down this road, the results will be lethal. I don't have much faith in school, but I do have faith in people. And if we can customize healthcare, cars, and Facebook pages, then it is our duty to do the same for education, to upgrade and change and do away with school spirit, because that's useless. Unless we're working to bring the spirit out of each and every student, that should be our task. No more Common Core. Instead, let's reach the core of every heart in every class. Sure, math is important, but no more than art or dance. Let's give every gift an equal chance. I know this sounds like a dream, but countries like Finland are doing impressive things. They have shorter school days, teachers make a decent wage, homework is non-existent, and they focus on collaboration instead of competition. But here's the kicker, boys and girls. Their educational system outperforms every other country in the world. Other places like Singapore are succeeding rapidly. Schools like Montessori, programs like Khan Academy, there is no single solution. But let's get moving, because while students may be 20% of our population, they are 100% of our future. So let's attend to their dreams, and there's no telling what we can achieve. This is a world in which I believe, a world where fish are no longer forced to climb trees. I'll rest my case.
We all know people who, when they graduated high school, ran down the steps on
Albert
We all
Einstein
know
once
people who, when they
said,
graduated high school, ran
"Everybody's
down
a
the steps
genius."
on graduation day and threw their notes in the air and said, "No more school," and celebrated that. If you celebrated no more school, school failed at something. Half of what a school should do should get you to be enchanted and excited about learning, so that you can become a lifelong learner when you leave school.
So that's just kind of like, I felt those two videos kind of accurately represented kind of what the staff here are really trying to achieve and what we pursue. And so some of, what you'll see tonight, we will talk about programs and stuff like that. And we're always trying to think of how can we take these programs and make them into something that are going to enchant kids, and how are we gonna, take these programs and leverage them in such a way that kids are gonna get excited about learning, because the programs by themselves are never gonna do that. They're not intended to do that.
We all know people who, when they graduated high school,
So the program, the primary program I'm going to talk about tonight is something called Illustrative Math, which I'm a former math teacher, and one of the things I realized, when I talk about like my time in school, is that math was my favorite subject, but I realized when I started teaching that I was really good at memorizing things and regurgitating them. I was not good at math. So I could pass all my tests with 100 because I could memorize the formulas and I could compute really well. But I was not good at mathematics. And there's a very big disconnect in most people in understanding that. And that's a big part of school that instilled this, is that people think that, well, if you don't know your multiplication facts, you're not a mathematician. If you don't know how to add, you're not a mathematician. And it's like mathematics is about logic and reasoning. It's about problem solving and critical thinking. And it's about being able to maintain composure when things get difficult, and thinking creatively. And the number of things that, number of times kids were asking me, why does this work? And I didn't have an answer, but I would go and figure it out. And now I can tell you how, something like, why do you flip and multiply when you're dividing fractions? Why do you flip and multiply the fraction on the right? It's just, to me as a kid, I could do it because the teacher told me to do it, and I was like, well, the teacher told me to do it, so therefore it must be correct, but none of my teachers knew why it worked. So magic became magical at that point, And when things are magical and not logical and sensible, then it doesn't mean anything to the kids, right? Like, that's why a lot of kids shut off with math, because we're not actually engaging them in the math, the problem solving, the creativity, and so trying to find a program that like embeds all that is really difficult. Illustrative math by no means is the be all end all. But it does take a problem-based approach to mathematics. The teaching, problems-based mathematics is a teaching method where students learn mathematical concepts by solving complex real-world problems. Instead of receiving just direct instructions, students are, not used to using this thing. All right. Students actively work with their peers and a teacher to investigate problems. They develop critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and also add in their collaboration skills, which is super important. Because one of the things when I think about real-world skills that kids need more than information is they need the ability to work with other people, they need the ability to handle hard things, and they need the ability to persevere. Those are things as somebody when I'm hiring, that's what I'm looking for. I can teach all the other stuff. We're adults. I mean, if I want to go, like I taught myself how to do carpentry 10 years ago. That's, like we can always learn new things, but there are certain skills, that are really hard to learn when you're older, and those typically tend to be social skills. So this approach emphasizes understanding the why behind the mathematics and how to apply it rather than just memorizing formulas. So the quotes I have here from some teachers that have been using it. We had many teachers last year who started using the program initially. We got some training over the summer, and this year every math teacher in the building is using it. So this is from one of the younger grade levels. There's lots of things are going well. We've had consistent routines established. Most students participate in the warm-up routine, and they're spending a majority of their partner work engaged in math and learning from each other. And then this is from our 5th, 6th grade teacher, and she is a math-only teacher, so she's spent the last 3 years teaching just math, so she's really got an opportunity to just invest herself in math. So she wrote this to me. She wanted to be here tonight, but she had a prior obligation. And she said, one thing that's going really well for my classes is the warm-ups. These activities have multiple entry points, which allow kids to engage in the activities. These introductory activities before each lesson involve a lot of discussion and creative thinking and critical thinking. I've seen that these activities have allowed kids of all ability levels to feel comfortable engaging in and sharing their thinking with the whole class. This has helped build many students' confidence in math. It's also helped to slightly reduce their anxiety about getting questions wrong in math, which has transferred to their willingness to attempt later problems in the lesson. The curriculum is heavy on exploration and allowing for multiple modes of solving a problem. This has been nice for kids who have unique ways of thinking of math as they get to explore their math at their own pace. There's a great deal of discussion as a whole class and with peers too, which has been a great way to get them using math vocabulary and explaining their mathematical thinking. We've used, and they like to use the online program Alex, and so that tends to be more for rote skills-based stuff, which illustrative math is objectively just, not great at that piece. So that's like memorizing multiplication facts and stuff like that. So in the older grades, she uses Alex to kind of work on those more kind of, memorization type stuff. Which still has its place. Like this is one of the things that over my almost 20 years in education that we tend to pendulum swing as people, and in math one of the pendulum swings is problem-based mathematics versus like the computational base and like the rote base. Rote base still has its place. It's not evil. Like if you memorize your multiplication facts, it helps you identify patterns easier. Right, because you can do math in your head quicker, and it makes tedious parts of math that are important less tedious. So it does have its place, but it is not the be-all, end-all, and it should not be the sole emphasis of what you do. I've got a quick slideshow of a kindergarten teacher who's been using illustrative math, and she actually made her own slideshow and wanted to be here, realized that she had a doctor's appointment come up last Friday, and they want her back tonight, and so she felt awful, and so she actually made her own slideshow and also did a voice dub
Good
Good
evening,
evening,
everyone.
So
This is Laura
she
Taylor,
asked me if this was
and I'm one of
okay,
the
and I'm like,
kindergarten teachers at Warren Community
in what
School.
world is this not okay?
I wanted to share some information about some exciting things happening at WCS in kindergarten. First, the illustrative mathematics program that we piloted in Warren last year and are using this year, along with another project of our team. I'm sorry I could not be there in person tonight, but I had some scheduling conflicts. I'm hoping this brief presentation will be useful for you. Illustrative mathematics is a problem-based curriculum that focuses on helping children to make real-world connections with math concepts and skills. It is a rigorous program highlighted by mathematical discourse and is aligned with the standards. There are layers and levels of assessment embedded within lessons and for summative evaluation of learning and teaching. This slide is small and you have a handout with the same information. This is an outline of Unit 2 for kindergarten, and I share it to show a progression of lessons for our young learners. The unit is all about numbers 1 to 10 and begins with oral counting, including various counting strategies, and matching quantities with spoken numbers. Then comparing groups of objects that are counted using language such as fewer, same, and more. Then we move into comparing images of counted groups, and finally, working with the relationship between quantities, spoken number words, and written numerals. The lesson snapshots that you'll see in this presentation are from Lesson 17, which is in Section C. At the end of the unit, which will be next week, children will begin to compare written numerals 1 through 10. Each lesson begins with a warm-up routine. We have several routines used in kindergarten, and these will continue and expand in first grade and on up. Warm-ups in kindergarten are done in whole group, using turn and talk with a partner, and typically reviews previous learning and sets us up for today's lesson. After the brief warm-up, there are typically 2 activities, each which include a lunch, partner or individual work, and a synthesis. After the activities, a whole group debrief or synthesis discussion of the activities takes place, usually with the teacher capturing the conversation on chart paper. Following the 2 lesson activities, children engage in math centers, which they see as games, that provide lots of practice in applying the skills and concepts introduced in lessons. Centers are specifically designed to increase the level of learning as they shift along the lesson sequence. These slides are the slides that are provided, which the students view during the lesson. Here's the target or goal for this lesson. One of our warm-up routines is Act It Out. Students become familiar with the routines and can apply new stories, situations, or content to those routines. In this case, the story is read by the teacher, and children are asked to think, not talk, about the question. Then the story is read a second time, and children might be asked to turn and talk with a partner. They turn knee to knee and talk quietly right on our rug area. And then they share ideas, perhaps something they heard their partner say. Here is a synopsis of our conversation. You can see the familiarity of the routine, as one child even suggested we could act it out. They have done this routine many times, and the responses are all ways we have previously acted out math problems. On this day, I asked the children to show 2 ways they can act out this story on their whiteboards. Here's one response. Here is the launch for today's first activity. The launch is teacher-led with this type of language and a demonstration. They worked in partnerships to build towers for the carts 1 through 10. The support of a partner helps anyone who may have difficulty completing a task independently. Then, while still at tables, we talked about what was easy or challenging about building the towers and checking for accuracy. This lesson moved right into activity 2, with the launch including the directive, put your cube towers and numbers in order in a way that makes sense to you. This is how one group completed the task. Here is how another group completed it. These are the notes from the activity synthesis after the children had completed a gallery walk to see how each group had completed the task. We are always eager to notice that our tasks can be sometimes done in different ways and can still be accurate. We then discussed these 2 prompts, and different partnerships shared what helped them put the towers and cards in order, as you can see on the next slide. One of the things I love about illustrative mathematics is the mathematical thinking and discourse that's embedded in every lesson and activity. Centers currently include these 3 games, some which can be done independently and some that involve partners. A few photos of this day's centers. A quick debrief of centers work. And a synthesis of the day's lesson. I'd like to quickly share another project our kindergarten team at Warren is excited about. These are not our students, by the way, but a Google image. After applying, we were happy to be one of the teams chosen to join the Maine Department of Education for 2 days of professional development in their Mainly Play Lab initiative, which includes a mini grant to use for materials. The Maine Department of Education 4Me early learning instructional programs are designed for pre-K through grade 2 on a continuum, and they include developmentally appropriate, high quality, and playful instructional practices that really reach the needs of the whole child. We were already engaged in much of this work, but feel energized and validated through our work with MDOE. We all began the next day after training to expand our community theme and shift our science period and extra recess at the end of the day to what we are now calling exploration time. The children are provided with provocations and materials so they can demonstrate new learning. The next slides show some of the projects completed in our first week. Photos don't begin to capture the language and excitement involved. Children in my classroom used materials from our makerspace to build special places in our community. They had brainstormed special places and we made a list with photos previously. Some used boxes to build WCS, Andes, the MAC, homes, and garages. One pair of students decided to transform our dramatic play space into Beth's Farm Market, where we had gone on a field trip earlier in the fall. In these photos, children are exploring with various building materials in another classroom. In another classroom, children used various materials to build a community. We are excited to continue developing our integrated curriculum units and to expand our use of these very intentional, purposeful, play-based opportunities.
Yeah, so the play-based stuff is gonna be a theme throughout this. There's actually, all the stuff kind of integrates together. Obviously, illustrative math, includes a lot more kind of active, hands-on, kind of play-based approach to math and exploration. And you're gonna see the same thing, kind of throughout the rest of the presentation, but does anyone have any questions or anything at this point? This works. No. So this is year 2 of Savas, and actually a little bit of what you saw in the play was part of the first unit in Savas from kindergarten with building the community. The first unit, Savas is thematically based as it goes through its units, and the first unit in kindergarten is community. And so that was part of what drove those projects was the community unit in Savas. And also, I'd also like the teacher, I was talking to one of my kindergarten teachers, and she said that those communities that they built, the kids are actually choosing to play with those during recess time, indoor recess time and indoor play, rest time and stuff, instead of like all the toys in the room. So it's kind of like a really neat, unexpected thing that took place as well. So a couple just testimonies from the teachers. They said the stories are great. They fit the grade level, they're age appropriate. The digital component is a useful resource so students can listen to the story while they do rereads, which is a great, easy tool to help, fit in accommodations for students. There are good resources online that are designed for Savas stories that can sometimes be better suited for our students' abilities. So our teachers are always out there looking for ways like, how can we make this just that much better? And so they're still doing Savas, but they'll, you know, they might look for like some stories, you know, they reach out to their teachers and stuff like that, and just do things to, you know, give them the best possible experience with Savas as possible. And then comprehension portion, across the board, all the grade levels say they really like that. The concepts about print are included in the lesson are great. You know, I talked about, this is from the kindergarten teacher who I was just talking about. She said she was able to incorporate some hands-on experiences in the afternoon that supplemented Savas unit for the week six project. They discussed places in Warren, took screenshots of them, and put them in a slideshow as I was teaching about places in Warren in the community. Students made things in the community from recycled materials. Many enjoyed making parts of Payson Park, the library, post office, Best Farm, the fire station. Students then wanted to make garages and tunnels and roads to go with the paper bag buildings that we made, and we really enjoyed, you know, writing about our special places in our neighborhood. The students now choose to play with their self-created town of Warren during choice time and indoor recess, and so they were able to take, you know, what is just a part of a literacy program. They were able to incorporate science, and they were able to incorporate some social studies, and
I think we need to have a field trip to Beth's farm.
yeah.
Let's go.
And so this is just another picture of some of the stuff that the kids were building. For science, and this is, I got a ton of pictures in the science section because I really am very proud of what, we got two of our science teachers here tonight. I know they're a little nervous about being here, but, so I won't put them on the spot too much, but, we put in a lot of work, on just, again, instilling curiosity in kids and maintaining it, and science is a huge piece of that. And it's also, when you're talking about literacy and getting kids reading, well, you have to have motivation to read. If you put something in front of me I have zero interest in, I'm not gonna read it, or if I do read it, I'm not gonna retain it. Science, I know for me as a kid, was a huge catalyst in getting me into reading, because it provided me opportunities to explore things, and then I got ideas and I wanted to research them, or I wanted to explore them more. Like, I've read a lot of books on animals, and for a lot of kids, this is like the motivation and for them to read. And there's a lot of, I know Tom Gray last year, if any of you talked to him, he probably mentioned it. There is a lot of potential, and I've come around to this a lot over the last few years, of teaching science, reading and math through science and social studies. It's a much more effective method, and I'd like to explore that more, and that's something I think I know Mr. Bellier this year is also trying to incorporate social studies into his science, and so far it seems to be going pretty well. I don't know if you want to touch base on that at all, how it's going, or do you want me to just keep talking? It's up to you.
It's going well so far.
Okay. So science in grades 3 to 6 happens every day for an hour, and one of the things that we've also done to make this happen as well is we've departmentalized in 3 through 6. So teachers don't teach everything in 3 through 6. I come from a middle school background, so my teaching experience was I taught math all day every day, and so like I went home at night and I researched math things. I looked up math, things from why did this work? Why did that work? So I went home and did a lot of research. I felt good about that, and then I felt like an expert at math. One of the things I didn't quite connect in my brain when I came here in elementary school is all the teachers when I first got here were teaching everything. And so I had a teacher comment to me one year, last year I was like really focused on literacy work, but then my math started falling. And of course there was no mention at this point in time of science or social studies or any of the other subjects because of No Child Left Behind back in the early 2000s. All the emphasis on testing, and what do we test? We test math and reading. So what happened after that? That's why when I got here, we weren't teaching science, we weren't teaching social studies, and a lot of people weren't even teaching writing when I first got here. It was just math and literacy all day because that was the focus. And that is not just unique to the school. This is like, nationwide. Elementary schools became a lot less hands-on, a lot less exploratory. There was a lot less emphasis on everything else. We've all heard the whole thing about how like home ec and all that stuff has gotten taken away, and that's all because of these tests that we keep focusing on, these multiple choice tests that supposedly determine things. And so I wanted to, I've talked to people a lot. It took a long time because I don't like to force people to do things. So it needs to happen organically, or you're just not going to sustain it. So I talked to people a lot over years, and it took years to get people to come around, but eventually people came around, and slowly it started with grades 5 and 6. They departmentalized, loved it because not only do you get to focus on like 1 or 2 subjects instead of 5? And so like you never have that feeling of like, oh, I'm focused on literacy this year, but my math is falling and this is falling. Like you feel like an expert. You feel competent and confident in what you're doing, which is huge. And that's absolutely huge too when it comes to the kids paying attention and being engaged. Because your ability to be creative and your ability to just be contagious as well. That's a huge part of teaching. You want to be contagious in what you're teaching. That comes when you feel confident and competent, and that especially happens when you get to focus. But when you feel like you're spread too thin and you're teaching things you don't really like, that becomes a problem. So 5th, 6th started it, and then 4th grade, slowly a couple years later, as I kept talking about it, then 5th and 6th grade teachers started talking about it, well then 4th grade started. Well then last year, my 3rd grade teachers were like, yeah, I'll give it a try, and every time people try it, so far, they've loved it and are having a really good time. And this year, we had 3 4th grade teachers last year, and 2 of them were departmentalizing. There's one that was really still resistant, and this year we collapsed the 4th grade position last year because Calvin retired, and then our other 4th grade teacher this year decided to try this departmentalizing thing that he's been really resistant to, and he loves it. And he's like, I don't know why I didn't do this sooner. So it does make a big difference. I don't know about K through 2 yet. I haven't thought about that. That's a whole other ball of wax we'll get into tonight. Because one thing I will say on that, and I think Tom actually framed it really well in the beginning of the year, K through 2, kids are learning to read. Grades 3 through 6, they're reading to learn. And so that changes the ball game in terms of how you approach education. And so there's some benefit potentially to keeping things the way they are in K through 2. And I know the teachers in K through 2 would like to keep it the way it is. So again, I would never force that on the teachers. If they feel like what they're doing is the best, then I'm gonna encourage that, because that's how you get the best teaching out of people. I want them, if they're gonna try it, I want them to try it because they want to. So our focus is on developing an organized and systematic approach to problem solving in science, and to limit emotional reactivity and impulsivity. So we want to develop critical thinking, work on students' ability to collaborate and work together to solve problems, and finally to foster a strong sense of curiosity in our students and about the world around them. Content is everywhere and available at all times to learn. The skills we are working on cannot be found in a book or online. In grades K through 2, classes are self-contained, like I just said, and science takes place 2 to 3 times a week for about 45 minutes. We're working on trying to expand that to daily, but there's just so much more that goes on in K through 2. Kids don't have the stamina, they need more time outside, they need a little bit more time in literacy to catch on to things because they're learning how to read. So there's some extra stuff in the ELA classes that they have to do that you don't have to necessarily do as kids get older. So that may not be, so that's something we're working on. Our goal is to get to having science every day. It may be 30 minutes instead of an hour for, as the older kids get. So we're working on that. Most teachers lean heavily, especially in the younger grades, on mystery science, which has great videos and activities and ideas for students to explore. And for a teacher who's teaching every subject, having something like illustrative math or mystery science, having a program to rely on for the areas where you're not the strongest is important, right? Being self-contained forces a different type of scheduling in the younger grade levels, kind of like I just said, is what I don't, here I am tangenting. Students are also, I said all that, all right. So this is actually another kindergarten teacher sent me a quick slide, shows some stuff that she's been doing during her science classes, and so they actually dissected owl pellets. So students were focused in their efforts to dissect owl pellets, and they were amazed at their findings. And the use of safety gear enhanced their experience and helped them feel like the scientists there are, and it's also just really cute. And they worked together to identify their findings on an informational chart. And that chart's right there, and so the kids were identifying all the different things that they're finding inside the owl pellets. And this is all the stuff that the kids communicated. The kids, helped write it themselves, about all the stuff that they knew about owls after doing this lesson, and then they worked together to create this project, outside the classroom. And stuff like that, without science, that kind of stuff doesn't take place, and that to me is just not acceptable. Our kids need this kind of stuff to motivate them to come to school and to engage them. They can't just be sitting at a desk all day. And then so this is some stuff from Mr. Bellier's class. He's the first full-time science teacher I got to hire. Mr. Hunter kind of took on the job initially when we departmentalized, but it wasn't necessarily like his thing. He just stepped up to do it because he knew that we needed a science teacher to departmentalize, and then he retired, and Mr. Bellier came on, and like just the things that he gets to do with the kids. So you can see like the noodle bridge they're building with the Barbies. The kids look forward to this every year. It's hilarious. They're trying to build a strong bridge and to support the Barbie. Like they push the Barbie off the bridge, right?
Yeah, Barbie jokes.
Yes.
Well, Barbie and Ken.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't just leave Ken on the shelf with that outfit. And that's my water bottle, which is over a couple of pounds. I mean, that one held everything.
Yeah.
And the water bottle was dropped too, so.
And then the kids are working together in groups, and it's messy, right? And not just physically messy, but like, and this is such an important thing, I think, and this is one of the things I was talking about when I said, like, this is something you're not gonna learn in a book, and you're not gonna learn online. It's, how do you work in a group to do something hard together? You're gonna storm before you norm. They're gonna argue, they're gonna get, I believe it was during this project, there was one kid I had to come down and talk to, cause he had crunched up the noodles and got mad at his, so we had to work that out, and that's where restorative practices came in. I got to circle the kids up, and I'll talk more about restorative practice later, but those kids by the end of, the year, that kid group, 6th grade group last year, when they graduated, they were thick as thieves. The community that had been developed in those kids because of this type of stuff. Like, they need these experiences to develop that though. They're not gonna get that in ELA and math class, just strictly, reading books and trying to compute things. And you gotta have hands-on, real-world kind of application and collaborative group work to do. And that's something that illustrative math brings in, is a ton of group work that kids have to collaborate on and they have to discuss and talk about. And as somebody who is hiring people, like, I tell people all the time, again, like, I can teach you content, I can't teach you how to manage a class and how to get along with your colleagues. That's something that, like, if you have that in place, I can work with anything else. You can be the smartest person in the world, but if you're a jerk that can't work with people, I don't want you here, right? And so this is some of the other stuff they did. They're building boats to hold pennies, and we use the nature trail a lot out back. We have salamanders and all kinds of little critters out there that they find, and just getting the kids curious about getting outside. So many kids don't get outside. I know Mr. Bellier brought in this. It's an anaconda skin. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. So the kids just get all these, again, just these hands-on experiences, and these things just spark their curiosity and get them curious and excited to come to school. They're building a paper tower to see how tall they can make it. What are the best kind of like structural designs to get it to be as tall and stable as possible. This is some stuff from Miss Woodruff's class, who was also here.
I do have this is one of the first things we do, that's making the paper fingers, and you would be surprised how much they're learning just from making this, and the tendons and all that kind of stuff, but this is cutting and having to fold it and having to follow multi-step directions, so it is a fun thing, and the fact that they get to take this home so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And this is a really cool, so Ms. Woodruff sent me all these pictures, and so we've got, Ms. Woodruff and Mr. Bellier, and I know Mr. Jacoby, all are big on, like, getting out in the garden and doing stuff, and so this is, she has some really nice kind of time-lapse pictures here. So, like, this is what, like, the greenhouse looked like a couple years ago, and then that's the fenced-in area with the box gardens. And so they got the kids out there, cleaning all that up and weeding it.
What's really nice is the 6th grade, we've got the 6th grade powerhouses, they can really do a lot of the work that the 4th graders just don't have the muscle for, so it's been really nice to be able to have those, especially the 6th graders went through the hoop house, and they just dug it all out and got giant weeds, and what was it, a tree size
Tree-sized weed.
mustard plant.
Like, we got a picture of that coming up.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's been really nice to be able to have both grades do that.
Yeah, and you can see in the top right corner, that's the box garden now, it's just night and day, from back here, where, like, it's just full of weeds over the summer, right?
And also the 2nd graders they went in with the, Knox Lincoln
pollinators.
Water Conservation, they've got, pollinator gardens with the perennials there.
Yep. And then you'll see with the hoop house, so up in the top left, that's actually work that Mr. Jacoby's done. We've got some new boards coming up, and we've got some wrapping for it that we gotta get up at some point here. But the first step was getting the garden all cleaned out, or getting the hoop house cleaned out. And then this is another project that Ms. Woodruff took on, that over the last couple of years. So outside of her classroom, there's this area, and she asked me one day, like, you know, could we just make a little ecosystem out there for the kids? So this is right outside her classroom window. I was like, yeah, go for it. You know, let's get the kids outside, let's get them working. And so this is fourth graders.
Justin, could I just suggest that for the hoops and the covering, you might wanna talk to Ryan McNally and see if the high school kids wanna come down
Ooh,
and show the younger students how they did it at the high school.
yeah,
They did a massive project at the high school.
yeah,
I bet those horticulture kids would love to come down and show
that's
the
a really
younger
good idea.
students and build relationships.
Yeah, well, that actually kind of goes in line with some stuff I'll be talking about later as well, because, you know, we're big on community, and I'll get into that. I'm gonna tangent if I gotta focus. Sorry, I get really excitable. So this is the beginnings of it, and then, you know, eventually they got some more water, they built some barriers around it, and then now on the left side there, that's what it looks like today. With they've added bird feeders, or like there's frogs that live in there now, and you know, you'll see squirrels come up to it and everything, and so the kids will be in the middle of class, and you know, not only did they build this, but they also get to see, you know, kind of nature. And a lot of these kids, I mean, they go home, they're sitting inside, they're on their tablets, they don't ever see anything, right? So it's a beautiful thing too about our nature trail. It's gorgeous out there if you've never been. Kids go out there, there's a stream that runs right through the middle of it. Mr. Newell's built like all kinds of really fun, like there's like climbing stuff on the trees. He's put like, you know, like the climbing wall stuff. He's put them on trees. He's got like little like, things you can hang on and climb, and just, the kids actually made a seesaw. Cause there's a tree that kinda goes up like this, so they found a big log and put it in between it, and it's really cute. So this is some of the stuff too. We brought Tanglewood in before, get the kids in, doing some creative problem solving. You know, second grade does that a lot. This is some more stuff from Ms. Woodruff's class, that she does during science, but also social studies. Social studies she does, you build what, wigwams, and then.
Yeah, wigwams and log cabins.
Yep.
And so basically they can use whatever they want, and it's a group project, so they get to put together whatever they decide. So it's, you know, and that, the one on the right is salt. We look at 3 different kinds of salt and sugar, and just, you know, see how they evaporate.
So passion projects is something that came up. I had this idea during COVID. So during COVID, we had the hybrid year. So kids came Tuesday, Thursdays, Monday, Fridays. Prior to COVID, office referrals were through the roof. Behavior was a constant thing. I mean, I was averaging like 600-700, you know, office referrals a year, and I came from Lewiston and Oxford Hills, so Class A schools, so I had class sizes of 28 to 30, and I was always just told class size doesn't matter. So, because I was told that, I just parroted it. I'd never actually really experienced a small class before, and when I got to the school, at one point, I know that now we're around 275 kids, at one point we're upwards of almost 400. Once you hit grades 3 through 6, our class sizes were, you know, or our class sizes were somewhere between, depending on the year, it could be between 22 and 30. You know, there was a year where we had, I think, 30 or 31 kids in a room, and our rooms are not big enough for this. This room is big. This is the art room. This is not a normal class size room. So we were cramming kids in there, and that was a big thing that, like, I noticed during the hybrid years. The first time that my school was, we had about 150 kids in the building. On any given day, 150 to 170 kids. So, because we had about half the building in here, and that year, during the hybrid year, the 3rd trimester, we came back full time, but we kept Wednesdays off for teachers to plan. So we came back 4 days a week. That entire year, I had, I think it was 45 office referrals, and 30 of them were one kid in one of our behavior programs, and that was not, that, yeah, he just was, you know, he was a very heavily traumatized kid, and you know, that wasn't like normal for our referrals. But it was a huge dip. And I was like trying to figure out why. So I went around and I talked to like pretty much all the kids in the building, and I'd ask them, like, you know, what's going on this year? Like, you know, like, how do you feel? And like all the kids said the same thing. I feel more relaxed. I feel less anxious because they're, you know, I have space people aren't piled on top of me, I can focus, and then they also emphasized, I feel like I'm actually getting attention from the teacher. So I'm actually they're getting their needs met in the class, right? Because the teacher has time to focus on you. When you're in a class of, 25, 30, teachers don't have time to focus on you and give you much attention. They got like a minute, maybe 2 minutes for you each class. It's just too much, that was one of the biggest things I had at Lewiston Oxford Hills, I remember, and I could go on a whole tangent about that, but like, one of the first things I noticed, like, you get done, you start working on something and you've got 30 kids in your class and 10 of them have their hands up, and then of course by the time you get to the 5th kid, 5 more hands are up, and by the time class ends, you still got, you've got kids who've been sitting there for 20 minutes confused without the ability to get help and without the ability to get their question answered, let alone the kids who you haven't been able to spot that have a question, but they're not willing to put their hand up. But if you were able to look at them, right, and analyze their body language, you would have been able to tell, but you've been so busy working with all these other kids, just the whole thing. So during that year, there was like I had multiple teachers come up to me and tell me they got through more content that year than they ever had before. That was a multitude of factors, even though the kids were only here 2 days a week for the first 2 trimesters. They were blowing through content. Class sizes were smaller, the kids were more relaxed, behavior had gone down, kids were more engaged, teachers were able to give kids more attention, and it was huge. And then when you look at the, there were studies done nationwide about like the standardized testing data that was done, and there wasn't even a blip on it. Like you couldn't pick out those years from other years. If you put a whole bunch of numbers and set them up, like you wouldn't be able to pick it out. Like kids still did well academically. There's the social piece where kids really tanked. So like I started thinking like, especially when we came back 3rd trimester and that trend continued, even though we had all the kids back in the building and it was 4 days a week. I'm like, why is that happening? And so I realized at that point in time that I think part of it was the fact that teachers had Wednesdays to plan. So teachers could, and students had Wednesday to just breathe. I kind of liking the way school's set up to studying for a test. First couple hours, you're doing really great, you're retaining stuff, but after a while you're studying and it's just, your stuff is just going in, then out, in, then out. And that's basically Thursday for the kids. And you'll see that like most behavior data, like Thursday, there's typically a pretty big spike in behavior because kids are worn out, they're tired, they're sick of being at school, like they're exhausted. But we didn't see any of that during that hybrid year or during that 3rd trimester where the teachers had Wednesdays to plan. And then teachers also too, from a mental health standpoint, were much better because they had that midweek pause to go, okay, how did the kids do in these lessons? What were they doing? And they could pivot and they could thoughtfully plan. They didn't have to go home and sacrifice time with their family to try to plan for and how to pivot. And it felt really good. And so my initial idea was like, can we turn Wednesdays? I can't say Wednesdays off from school. I was like, but can we take Wednesdays, and this isn't my problem, right? Like I get an idea and it's too big always. It's always too big to start. I was like, every Wednesday we can do just like this hands-on learning to energize kids and stuff, but of course that adds so much to the teacher's plate because planning a hands-on lesson is intense. So the teachers talked me down a little bit, and so on early release days we do passion projects because that's just an awkward day to begin with, and so passion projects, the idea behind it too is I want teachers to help kids find their passion by bringing their passions into school. And some of the teachers, it's evolved since then, and some of the teachers will actually talk to their kids, and kids will take turns talking about things they would like to do. Mr. Barry started doing a chess club this year, which is awesome. We have multiple teachers who've done weaving or crocheting with kids, and we've had so many kids that continue crocheting, and they've made me stuff, or we had a kid who went off to the middle school a couple of years ago, and came back and actually said, what she learned during passion projects of how to crochet, it actually helps her with the stuff that goes on at home. It helps her find peace, and so it's a little thing that helped that kid, and seeing that kid today, she still stops by the school. I mean, she's a night and day different kid from when she left here, and she's doing so much better, and a big piece of it was, doing stuff like this. They work on the greenhouse and garden. They do a lot of just different types of engineering puzzles. The teacher who did the illustrative math slideshow has all kinds of cool things I got some pictures of, where her and a 2nd grade teacher team up, and they do not a shoebox or not a cardboard box, and she even has like a table saw, for cardboard. The kids aren't gonna hurt themselves doing it, but it cuts cardboard and stuff, and like, and they have like all these little cool tools and hinges and stuff, so they can like build whatever they want. And so they'll have different puzzles that, some kids are just doing actual puzzles. Cause a lot of these kids, if they go home, it's a tablet, so like some teachers have just, kind of showed them, some like old school playing, right? Pumpkin explorations, they'll do thematic explorations. We had, this year we had a classroom that had the law enforcement come in and do some apple explorations with kids, just to get kids more comfortable with law enforcement and let them see that, like, cause for some of our kids, all of their experiences with law enforcement's coming to the house because mom and dad are fighting. So we wanna show them that, like, law enforcement, actually, they can be really nice people, and they can be something, they can be really helpful, and so that was really cool. Fire departments come in to do fire safety stuff. Our health teacher does the 100-mile club, which is amazing. It's something the kids sign up for, and they have a little thing that they can scan, and their goal is to get 100 miles of running in throughout the school year. And so there's lots of opportunities. Mr. Newell's measured out things like the field, going around the field, going around the gym. So she'll be down in the gym or outside, and she'll, kids can sign up and go out and they can run as long as they want, and try to get that, trying to build those healthy habits, makerspace stuff, nature trail explorations, all kinds of fun things. Oh, that's the basic tree-sized weed in the middle there. Those are the kids, 3 kids there, the second graders and kindergartners on the right. They're working on, the not a shoebox. Some of the pumpkin explorations, more of the shoebox stuff, the actual puzzles. And there's actually a picture, I don't know if I have it in here, but when they completed the puzzle, the grins on those boys' faces was awesome. So this is another one of the engineering puzzles. I forget exactly what they're doing in that picture with the tubes, but I think they're doing something with race cars, if I remember correctly. Mr. Bellier has actually, and Mrs. Couch in 6th grade have done actual cooking with the kids, so that's butter that the kids made, and those are pancakes they're making. And one of the really profound things from that, multiple kids were just like, they didn't know what a spatula was, never seen one, never heard of one, 6th grade. Right, so again, like these if you don't have experiences, what's your motivation to read a book, right? Because you don't have a way to connect to the book, right? Like we're trying to give kids some of those experiences that a lot of them aren't getting. So any questions on that before I got restorative practices and then regulated classroom. I know I'm talking a lot, but nothing? I'll keep going. Restorative practices is something that has made a huge impact on me as someone who grew up very socially awkward and shy, and this job in general was a big outside of my comfort zone thing. Part of why I got into teaching was I was always more comfortable around kids than I was adults and people my own age, because kids just weren't judgmental, right? You can do and say anything and they're gonna think you're funny. And I was always worried about, how are people gonna respond to me if I talk, and I overthought everything. And one of the things that, like, with restorative practices and regulated classroom, I had like the same response when I initially went to those trainings. Restorative practices seems like a really overly simple idea. It also seems kind of silly. I remember the first time I walked into there, they were like, we're gonna get in a circle and we're gonna have a talking piece and one person's gonna talk. I was like, this is stupid. But literally it's a 2-day training, and by the end of that 2 days, I was more connected. I actually went back to the staff and I talked to them. I was more connected to the 40 people in that room that I did restorative practice training with than I am with most of you here, and I've known you guys for a decade. Like, this is insane. Like how we were able to connect through this methodology, and it was really just, I don't know, it made a huge impression on me, but it makes sense too when you break it down. It's not as simple as, it's a circle. So the restorative approach is a philosophy that sees relationships as central to learning, which is also what we view for teaching. Relationships you don't have relationships with the kids, they're not learning. Restorative, it's an approach and a philosophy about growth and a healthy school climate for both students and adults. A growing number of brain research and school connectedness studies speaks to the importance of creating these strong bonds among students and adults as a proactive and preventative way of reducing conflict and aggressive behaviors in school. Within the restorative approach, we use various restorative practices that enable all members of a school community to build a climate of trust, respect, and open-mindedness. One of the primary restorative practices is the community circle model, which offers an opportunity for teachers to create a safe space for students to learn about each other, ask difficult questions, discuss challenging topics, and process problems that impact learning and classroom culture. And I would also say as well, this isn't just for kids, this is for adults as well. And it works. Circles provide a safe and respectful structure for sharing and listening deeply to one another. So how does a circle work? Everyone participating in a circle, there's no distractions, no phones, no computers, no nothing. So everyone's in a circle, so by nature you're all looking at each other, right? Which is huge. When you're in a classroom and all the desks are in a row and stuff, like, you know, you can kind of like hide, right? You can get distracted, but you actually see each other in a circle. Only, and it, again, it's something that I can talk about, but until you experience it, it does make a difference. You have to experience it. I did it with my staff when I got back in 2019 for my training, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but I mean, the impact is pretty incredible. Only the person with the talking piece may speak. So that's huge. So that's helping to teach people and kids, you know, one person speaks at a time, don't interrupt each other, don't talk over each other, because it's not productive. You know, whether you're trying to solve a problem, whether you're trying to learn something, whether you're trying to, there's many ways to use circles. They can be used as conflict resolution, but they can also be they can also be used as a learning tool as well. The facilitator typically asks pre-planned questions, but also can be on the fly. And each person gets a chance to respond to the questions with their take. This is not typically a time to respond to someone else. And so like when I'm working with kids, for example, if I don't do like a circle, a lot of times like one kid's talking and you're lying, you're like they interrupt and they cross talk over each other. But with a circle, like having that talking piece, they let that kid speak, and I lay out these rules ahead of time. You know, and they are really good at respecting those, and you know, and it's just more like, what happened? This kid's gonna get to speak. This kid's gonna get to speak, and I'm very clear. Like, we're not talking about what they said. You're talking about, you know, what you perceive to have happened, and it helps to avoid a lot of that stuff that muddies down the conflict resolution process. Anyone can pass on answering at any time and without judgment. So if you're not comfortable, you're not comfortable, and if you just want to watch and observe, you can watch and observe. It's again kind of like I talked about with my teachers. It's not about forcing kids or anyone to do anything. Circles can be used for a variety of purposes, whether that's learning, conflict resolution, community building, and more. We can be direct, but we also need to do so respectfully. It is not an opportunity to engage in ad hominem or personal attacks. So that's also another just foundational principle of the circles that you kind of lay out ahead of time. And kind of circles date back to, you know, that there's a reason why, like, we all talk about, you know, like you sit at the dinner table, eat a meal, you're all circled up, you're looking at each other, you're talking, you're engaging, and you're connecting. And it's really hard to do that if like we sat at the dinner table like we do in a classroom, in like a traditional classroom, like you're not going to connect with your family at that point. You're all just basically, it's like you're all sitting in front of the TV watching a TV and eating, you're not connecting with your family in that moment. Right, and so that's part of why the circle is so important, is it forces you to realize this is a human being in front of me, not an enemy, it's another person. And for whatever reason, you know, that connection just allows people to be more vulnerable, and it's a really cool thing to experience. So the goals of restorative practices are to understand the harm done and develop empathy. This is if you're using it for conflict resolution, and to develop empathy for both the harmed and the harmer. To listen and respond to the needs of the person harmed and the person who harmed. To encourage accountability and responsibility through personal reflection within a collaborative planning process. To reintegrate the harmer into the community, to create a caring climate to support healthy communities, and to change the system when it contributes to the harm. And so I recently did a circle with some kids. There's a student who actually, in this room, started throwing things. And the class had to be evacuated. And the initial kind of reaction, you know, from the teachers at first was like, you know, I don't want this kid back in the classroom. Should we even let the kid back into the mainstream? You know, what should we do about it? Blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, let me get the kids together since they're the ones who were affected. And I circled them up, and, you know, and they you know, they communicated, like, you know, the first question I asked them was like, you know, when, you know, this, you know, so-and-so was throwing things around the room, how did this make you feel? And so the kids went around, so the kid who threw the things got to hear from his classmates how they felt, and there's a variety of different feelings. And then, you know, I got to ask him, like, how did that make you feel hearing that? And he, you know, he got to talk about that. And then I got to, you know, and also, like, he got to talk about kind of why he did what he did. And then I asked, like, you know, I forget the exact question, but it was somewhere along the lines of, like, you know, how are you guys feeling right now? Are you, you know, about your friend here? And, you know, where are you at in terms of your feelings? Are you angry, whatever? And the kids were great. Like, they said, we love him and we want him back in our classroom. And he got to hear all that from his classmates. And then I got to him, and then from there, I always do, like, when I end things, I was like, is there anything else anyone wants to share? You know, just in case there's something really pressing on a kid's mind. And honestly, like, at that point, like, this student had opened up about something that was frustrating him, and that's why he ended up doing those things, and it wasn't all related to school. And so then the other kids that were involved in the circle opened up about things that they had experienced at home as well, and outside of school, and were able to connect with each other in a way that they never would have if we just isolated that kid from the classroom and gave him just strictly, like, oh, we're gonna put you on the school suspension for 2 days, we're not gonna, you know, do any sort of restorative work, and it was really neat. And so he actually ended up going back down to the classroom and had a good rest of the day. And it was really, it was a cool experience. So, and I've done the same thing with adults in the building, you know, where I've got them to circle up, because a lot of times, 99% of the time, the frustration between adults, it's a misunderstanding, miscommunication. You know, I know when I did circles back in 2019, it was just, all I did was ask staff, you know, I said, take 2 minutes, just sit, and it was actually 2 minutes, you know, I didn't, it wasn't like 2 seconds, I timed it. I was like, and just sit and look at what's going on in here. And I had 12 people in my group, I had 3 different groups going, and I said, okay, and then the 2 minutes obviously, like, feels like forever when everyone's just quiet and sitting thinking. I'm like, no, I'm just asking real simply, like, how are you feeling right now? I had like 4 staff in tears, and so many staff were just like communicating that, like, I have not slowed down for I don't know how long, and I didn't realize how much of a mess I am right now. And just, they were so vulnerable with each other. I mean, we had one staff member who I remember talking about, like, you know, he was really open and honest about the fact that, like, I'm a big dude, and so, like, I've always been big, I've always been tall, always been big, and, like, people, one, think I'm more capable than I am because of that, but also they perceive me as being aggressive when I'm not being aggressive, right? They perceive me as, you know, being angry when I'm not angry because I intimidate them because of my size, and that makes me feel awful. You know, and it was really cool to hear that from him. And to see, I never thought this staff member would have opened up like that, and he did. And I mean, if I had to pick someone who, you know, would have, like, bucked this stuff, I thought it would have been him, and it wasn't. Like, he opened right up in it, and people heard him, and which was really cool. You know, just people, there's always a lot going on with teachers, and the fact that they're still able to come in and do what they do with kids every day just amazes me. The stuff that you know, they deal with on a day-to-day basis, you know, in their personal lives, let alone, you know, as well as at school. They're amazing people, and not everybody is built for this job. And restorative practices also, along with regulated classroom, meld really well with this. This is one of my favorite things when it comes to leadership, because I think this really hits the nail on the head. You know, if you don't have trust, first and foremost, which requires a relationship with the people in your building, your team, this isn't just for teams, this isn't just for businesses, this isn't, you know, this is also in your relationship at home, right? If you don't trust each other, you have nothing. Trust is the first and foremost. And a lot of times, the number one cause for teams or businesses or relationships to fail is there's a lack of trust somewhere. And then the second biggest contributor to that is fear of conflict, and I think, you know, 90% of business teams and relationships fail in those 2 ways. They don't address conflict, and they don't trust. And I think too, like, that's why circles are so important, because it's a healthy way to address conflict. You know, a lot of times when you look at the way that systems handle conflict, it is actually, it erodes trust and it erodes the ability to form and build a relationship, whereas with circles, it actually brings people closer. And any relationship that you have, like I talk about, you know, I talk to people all the time about like my relationship with my wife, for example, like we've been together for almost 20 years, and we have come so incredibly far, but it's because we have persevered through difficult times. We were not as great as we are now. We used to fight like the Dickens, and like a fight would be a week long, cold shoulder, kind of like, you know, but we worked through all that, and you know, and we faced that, we faced the conflict head on, and it wasn't always pretty, but now we have a beautiful relationship where we really understand each other and see each other, and it's the same thing with any team that you build. You know, you have to go, there will be hard times and you have to address them, and you have to address them in person with each other, or that is never going to get better. It's just going to have you're always gonna have a toxic culture otherwise. And one of the things I think here that I value and why I've been here for so long is we have an awesome culture here. We have an awesome team of people, and when things get tough, we talk about it. And that's something that I'm very, very big on. And so this is one of my favorite little, I don't know what you call it, but charts or whatever. Because I think it really, like, if you're trying to forge a relationship or a team or a company or whatever, I think this is huge. This has been very helpful for me as I've gone through my career. So the last thing I want to talk about is regulated classroom. I did this training, again, same response as I had to the restorative practice training. Within, I think, 5 minutes of being there, this lady had me up and hitting music sticks, and she was like dancing to some music, and I was like, this is not me. And I wanted to walk out. By the end of the 2 days, when she had me doing these silly things, I was relaxed, I was comfortable, and again, you know, anyone knows me super well, I don't get up and dance in front of people, and I don't do that kind of stuff. It makes me very, very uncomfortable. But regulated classroom is one of the beautiful things about it, and I've got many, many staff who've done it now, who've gone through the training, and working on getting the whole staff trained. It's for both teachers and students. And it's all about the nervous system, and this is really timely for me, because I've had this personal experience after I had my stroke. My nervous system was a mess, so I got to experience a lot of what she was talking about at this training firsthand in a very like significant, tangible way. So regulated classroom is a tier 1 somatosensory and polyvagal informed approach to cultivating conditions for felt safety in the classroom. Basically, that's a really like fancy way of saying it's a way to build the nervous system's capacity to respond rather than react to what's going on around it. We all have a nervous system, but its capacity to respond is affected throughout your life. It's like your muscles, right? It's very much like strength training. It's very much like a muscle, in the sense that if it's not practiced, it fluctuates depending on what's happening to it, depending on what kind of abuse it takes, depending on how it's cultivated. Some people or kids' nervous system and its ability and capacity to respond versus react is almost non-existent, and we have to build that. And so what does this have to do with education? Well, we have so many kids where they're in fight, flight, or freeze almost all day. So they don't have the capacity to learn because their capacity to respond is almost non-existent. And so we have to build that. So much of education to me nowadays, it's less academic, which academics are important, but like that's always something you can learn. You can always learn academics. This stuff is really difficult. The older you get, the harder it is to shift this stuff. And so like a lot of what we do is actually social. Because we need kids to have a relationship with us and feel safe with us in order for them to even begin to engage in learning. And for a lot of our kids, especially nowadays, for whatever reason, there's like 500 different things we could potentially point to for why this may be the case, but a lot of these kids don't have that feeling of safety. And it's not necessarily anything that people here are doing, right? But that still, that lack of feeling of lack of safety feeling is just, it carries over. If you've gone through a traumatic experience, that trauma follows you no matter where you go. So, and this is also true, like so the lady who did this training, she's very intent on this is teacher first, and then it trickles down to students, because teachers have to be regulated for students to be regulated. And so what kind of drove her to do this is you realize, like, you know, nationwide, teachers aren't regulated because of the nature of the job. We have an increase in aggressive and disruptive student behaviors. Student mental health needs are blowing up. There are hostile parents, and I would also add to that, not just hostile, but like, part of why it's hostile is because of the method of communication that parents have access to now. You know, when you think about that, the principal who was here when I was the assistant talked about how when she was a principal in her early years, like, email didn't exist, right? So like, and I remember being a kid, like, my parents never reached out to the school. When were they gonna reach out to the school? At 5:30 when they got home at night from work? When the school's closed? And the only way to access them was the phone? No, there was no way to contact the school unless you took a day off and went into the school, right? So most parents didn't contact the school, and especially at 1 in the morning, right? The number of times I get emails from people at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock at night. You know, I'll get messages on Parent Square, I'll get, you know, just, you know, we have, people have access to us 24 hours a day. So that has changed the game, and a lot of it is not face-to-face, right? So you can just think about, you know, I mean, if you've lost your cool on someone, I can bet you 9 times out of 10 it was on the phone, right? Like, unless it's someone like you're really comfortable with, but like, it's a lot easier to lose your cool on the customer service person, you know, on the phone or through the email than it is in person, right? Like, most people in person are not gonna, like, you know, be as volatile. And when I say hostile, like, they're well intended, right? I'm not saying the parents are evil. But, you know, they go into mama bear mode or daddy bear mode, and, you know, they just wanna protect their kid. But the way it comes out is not always productive or helpful or kind. And that's important as an administrator to understand that, like, you know, and, you know, that's why, you know, we can't lose our cool, right? And some of my initially most hostile parents have also become some of my biggest supporters years later, because eventually they see that you really are there to help their kid. They're some of my favorite parents. But it's still stressful when you're dealing with it, right? And especially as a teacher, you know, if they don't have, you know, sufficient administrator support, which is also listed there, then that becomes really stressful. And then also, teachers have taken on extra responsibilities due to not just staffing shortages, but I just think expectations. School seems to be the #1 go-to place. If something is quote unquote wrong with kids, school has to fix it. And we can't be the be-all end-all for everything, which we try, but there's only so much. We only have them for so many hours a day. So teacher wellness has been linked not only to the teacher's physical health, but also to stability in schools and to teaching effectiveness and students' achievement. Moreover, teachers' emotions and stress levels have been found to influence those students and other teachers. And that's just a human thing. It's not just teacher to student, and we all influence each other. Our emotions are contagious. If you're around people who are depressed all the time, you eventually get depressed yourself. If you're around people who are angry all the time, you eventually get angry yourself. There's a reason why I put out something that's, you know, I try to focus a lot on, and in general, and our teachers too, on gratitude and appreciation. I do a gratitude garden roughly every 2 weeks, where I just talk about all the things I'm thankful for. We start all of our meetings talking about things that we appreciate that have happened since the last time we met, because it's really easy to get bogged down in the negative because we're not wired, and that's part of a regulated classroom. She actually acknowledges this. We're not wired to be positive, we're wired to be defensive. Your brain is constantly trying to recognize patterns that are dangerous to you because of our history as people. What we live in now is very recent for human history. Human history has been rife with just war and conquest, and there still is a lot of that throughout the world, but at least here, we don't have that right now, but that's also very recent in human history. Our biology is conditioned to be very defensive. So it's really hard to focus on the positive, because your body kind of bucks against that. So the regulated classroom is rooted in the concept of co-regulation. So co-regulation is a way to share a safe state with another person or child. When feeling stressed, educators engage with students in a core practice of the regulated classroom as a form of co-regulation. The practices and tools of the regulated classroom make those in the class feel safe, thereby enabling teachers to teach and students to connect and learn. And so those practices I was talking about before, they're connectors, activators, settlers, and affirmations. And these things all take 30 seconds to a minute. She talks about how doing them every 20 to 30 minutes, and she actually did this with us during the training. She did all of these things with us, she didn't just preach at us. And like I said, by the end of that 2 days, you know, when she asked me to get up in front of this circle of 43 people and do something, I got up and did it. Whereas if she first asked me, I would have been like, nope, I'm good. I would have passed, right? It does help. And a lot of our kids are, you know, in fight, flight, or freeze mode. And when you see, one of the things I really like to stress to people too, because we see this especially in males, right? Males are way more prone to expressive anger, right? And one of the things a lot of people don't realize is anger is a secondary emotion. It's not a primary. And men, we are really, really good at using anger as a way to mask other things, and that's what it is. It's masking embarrassment, it's masking frustration with something, it's masking the feeling of insecurity. So realizing, you know, kind of being able to recognize these things and then kind of ask the question of, okay, what's going on there? There's something deeper going on, and our teachers and our programs, they're primarily males. They deal with a lot of that, and they're some of the most amazing humans you're ever going to meet. Actually, I was just talking to one of our ed techs in the Endeavor K2 program, and she's doing homework tonight, right before this meeting in the classroom. And I asked her, I was like, you going into teaching? And she's like, yes. And I was just like, so you're thinking like special ed, you think regular ed, you thinking middle school, elementary school? She's like, 100% special ed. And she's been with us now for like 2 or 3 years. And she's amazing, and like the behaviors that she has to deal with, right, are intense. But these staff see through those behaviors and they see the kids because they're regulated. Like, so there's some of the most amazing staff you're ever gonna run into, and they take literal beatings at times, and they absolutely love and adore these kids, and they come back to work with a smile on their face every day. It's awe-inspiring. Again, there's a reason why I come here. And this is just talking about what I was saying in the beginning about our capacity. You know, the goal of the activators and the connectors and the settlers and stuff is to try to get that. You need to slowly build that nervous system up, and that's why I liken it to strength training. You don't start off bench pressing 250 pounds, you start off bench pressing 50, right? And so that's why these things are like 30 seconds to a minute, and you just slowly build it, slowly build it, slowly build it. Like at first the kid's gonna be really uncomfortable, but over time it's gonna get stronger and stronger and stronger, and their capacity to respond versus react is going to grow. But it takes time, and it's, for every kid, that time is gonna be different. You know, for some of our kids, you know, one of the most amazing things about being in elementary school is we get the kids for 8 years. I get to see kids who were a hot mess in pre-K, and by the time they leave here in 6th grade, you wouldn't recognize them. And that's such a super cool thing to see, and that's kind of what this is aimed at helping to build. It's a really interesting way to look at things. Ross Green is really good. He talks about how kids would do well if they could. And this also melds with that. It's like an evolution of his model where he talks about they would if they could, and he talks about how like kids don't have the skills. You know, if the kids don't have the skills to do it, and they, you know, therefore they can't do it, that's when you see behavior. So we need to teach them those skills. This goes a step further and being like some of those skills. This goes a step further and says some of those kids can't even access learning those skills because they don't have the capacity to respond. Right? They all they're doing is reacting because they're in constant fight, flight, or freeze. And so how do we build that capacity so they can then get the skills so they can then have pro-social behavior? And so this is the polyvagal theory. I've already talked about that. We have pushed children into an abnormal environment, and this goes back to the videos I played in the beginning, where they are expected to spend ever greater portions of their day under adult direction, sitting at desks. We leave them less time for freedom to play and explore, and thus killing their curiosity, and that's why you see some of that light dim over time in school. Information doesn't do much to shape a developing brain, but play does. We need to help kids find themselves and find who they are, find what their passions are, and I would also talk too about the fact that if you take a look at the job market, I've got more of an optimistic view on AI, because if you take a look at the job market over the last 100 years, as technology has just blown up. We've gone from humans have gone from basically you have to have a plot of land, you have to farm it, you've got to hunt and grab your own food, to, okay, well now we can go work in factories and make money, but the job market was very limited. There's a lot of like factory stuff, right, during the industrial age. And over time, as technology has advanced, and AI is going to automate a lot of things, right, but it's also, the things it's going to automate are a lot of tedious things. And what you've noticed is There was a point in time where they said, if you were an artist, the only time you get famous is after you're dead. And that's when your art's worth money. That's not the case anymore. And it's because of automation, it's because of technology. Because a lot of those tedious jobs have gone out the window, they're no longer necessary. More and more creative type jobs are going to be on the forefront in the future. And school needs to respond to that. We need to put more emphasis on the arts. We need to put more emphasis on creativity and critical thinking and play and exploration. Because that's going to be where the job market is. Students do not need to be trained to be working in a factory, putting things together and being good little robots. They need to be individuals who are creative and comfortable and competent and competent. This just talks about all the different skills that it takes to get to academic learning. And the central nervous system is at the foundation. And then from there you see like a lot of occupational therapy stuff, you see a lot of speech therapy stuff that a lot of our kids struggle with. We have a ton of kids, our speech and occupational therapists are overloaded with kids. Because there's a lot of deficits in those areas, and I think a lot of it stems from the fact that their central nervous systems are out of whack. If you talk to my OT, I'm pretty sure she would confirm that to you. She went to the regulated classroom training with me as well. She loved it. Our social worker, Annie Gray, as well. She is very familiar with polyvagal theory. So in polyvagal terms, play is a neural exercise that allows us to experience arousal or mobilization in our nervous system without shifting into a protective state, so fight, flight, or freeze. The presence of relational cues of safety, intermittent eye contact, close physical proximity, smiles, laughter, playful movement, enable us all to tolerate that quality of experience without being hijacked into defensive mobilization. So this is the author of Polyvagal Theory, Dr. Stephen Porges. And this is our new playground. This is the last slide. So, and I just put this in here because part of why we chose the pieces we did, you'll notice there's a lot of climbing. There's a lot of just physical interaction. Before we had this giant structure and kids they could run on it and sit on it and it was very kind of idle. I think too many kids are going home and they're not getting outside, they're not engaging in hard play, but also risky play, which is important. Like a lot of people see this and they're like, what if they fall? Well, that's part of play, right? The number of times I fell and got scraped and hurt. I mean, I rode my bike, I don't know how many miles into the middle of nowhere and flipped it, and that's part of, I learned how to ride my bike really well because I was really, dangerous with it, but, now I can, do all kinds of stuff with it, but, kids need to be able to do this. There's one thing that's really cool, it's this thing back here. If you ever want to see what it would look like in a zombie apocalypse, the kids, there's like 18, and it's actually meant to be like this. There's ropes here and it spins. It doesn't go as fast as the merry-go-rounds from when I was a kid where you'd go at G-force speeds. But like there would be like 18 kids. I mean, there'd be a kid way up here and that thing's just spinning around. They're having a heck of a time. And at first people were like, oh no, and we actually looked it up. That's just how it's supposed to be used. So we want to make sure the kids were using it appropriately. But yeah, in other schools, that's how it is used, and it is really good for them. Yeah. Any questions? Yes.
So, I actually just gave a presentation last night about the importance of co-regulation and emotional regulation, and you can't learn if you're in fight, flight, or freeze. So like, I would personally like to see the entire district do regulated classroom. I think that's how we can address so many different issues with relatively inexpensive, relatively, not time consuming. This is not hard stuff. And your playground is magical because it also takes all those sensory seekers and gets them spinning and upside down and integrates the appropriate that have been put so that then they can go back in the class and sit down and pay attention for a minute when they have to. This is all my bread and butter right here too. So I'm really, really excited about the sensory stuff and the regulation, emotional regulation and all of that. So I would really like to see that go district wide. I think it's huge. Particularly in a situation where we don't have, there's not OTs raining from the sky.
No.
And quite frankly, all of us would benefit from OT, and that's really one way. You can also sort of normalize those activities. Like every kid should, be upside down, inside out, and spin around on the playground, and it helps everybody regulate
And just physically develop properly.
Yeah, and you gain physical strength so you can actually sit at your desk and hold your pencil, and it just integrates everything. And I guess one of my questions is not necessarily for you, but as somebody who's sitting here, my kids go to a different school, and we've heard such great presentations across the district. Is I have like FOMO, honestly, like of all the different stuff that's really cool that's happening at all the schools. How do we get it like everywhere? And I don't know if there's an answer to that question, but it's sort of, you know, like I want that playground, I want, you know, the regulated classroom and all the other cool stuff that you guys are doing here, and I've been a fan of the Passion Project idea since I heard about it last year, and I think that's a great idea. So some of these things, you know, when we throw everybody's little school stuff into the basket, you know, pick out what would really benefit everybody, I think would be great.
Two things.
Yep.
I think that the restorative practice and practices and the regulated classroom, like it's phenomenal. And I think it's a more targeted and just a much better approach than very contrived social emotional learning.
Yes.
I mean, let's ditch that and go with this. That's what I think around the district, the whole district. It's because that, the SEL is just, I feel is very contrived. This is real, number one. So, and my number two is, if you had been my principal when I was teaching here, I would still be in teaching. Lack of, one of the things was lack of administrative support. And man, that was big. I'm kind of envious of the teachers who are in this building right now.
I've been here 10 years, that's
Yeah,
why.
second that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanna be a student in your class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, who kind of organized or facilitated the restorative practices and regulated classroom training? Was that through the Department of Education, or was there some?
Yeah,
Did
so
you hear about
I've done training, most recently through George Conant, and he's part of restorative practices. My initial training was through, I think it's called, RJT maybe? So I've had training in both. George is he's a retired educator, former principal and teacher, but he loved restorative practices so much that, I mean, he's in his 70s and he's still kicking butt with it and loves it. I mean, his passion for it is palpable, and he's awesome, super sweet guy. And he's also got a co-trainer who actively teaches, I believe, might be in Whitefield, I think, and she's awesome as well. So that's who I've been going through most recently.
Back in the day, there was a program called the Responsive Classroom.
Yep.
And
Oh,
I
it still
follow,
exists.
I follow that.
Yep.
So this is, it's just like, yes,
Yeah, it's all the same stuff.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Do we have any other schools who have either administrators or teachers that are utilizing either one of these programs doing that?
I know for the regulated classroom, we do have it's paid for with a grant, it's actually offered free for teachers, and there's another one coming up. I know, Justin, you just shared it with your staff, and I think that our administrator in Union is going with some the team of teachers, and I believe other schools too. I'm not sure, I can't.
It's one of the best trainings I've been to in a very long time. The really cool thing about it is, so it's a trainer training. And so the whole slide deck that she used and all of the activities she used, we have access to. We have access to everyone who's done the trainer. She's got a website, and we have access to all the people who've gone through the training. So there's like a little community, online community that you can access and talk to people about stuff. But then we're also, for every person that goes, we get 15 copies of her new version of her book, which has a list, a very comprehensive list of all kinds of different all the little activities that they talk about, the activators and sellers and stuff. There's 25 of each of those in there. So it's it's not just we're gonna read this to get educated thing. It's actually a tool you can use. We're getting all that stuff. I'm coordinating with her right now to come to the school to train the whole staff to kick it off, not to train them, but she's gonna do a 2-hour kickoff for us, just because I want them to, I want the kickoff to get good buy-in, and her personality is infectious, and I don't know that I'm quite there yet where I'm gonna get up and dance in front of staff, right?
Well, sounds like you are, actually.
Yeah, but I know she will, so,
Yeah.
and I've got access to Tier 3 funds, That come through the government, and I will be using those to get her over here and, in the process of locking that down, so pretty excited about it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We'll put this on our agenda we'll add it to the agenda for tomorrow.
Okay.
For elementary school teachers, elementary principals.
Perfect.
The best way to do this is to get people to want to do it.
Yeah.
Because you can mandate it, but you can't mandate engagement.
Yeah.
So the best thing is the most effective way to create school change in a school is to get people doing something that's really happening and then have other people be curious about what they're doing and learn with them. Than to say, it's just like the student, it's people. All people are better when they're curious. So the best thing that we can do is have Justin share what's working and have, the best thing would be to have his teachers tell other teachers.
Yeah.
Because the last thing they want is for like us to be like, oh, we're gonna do this, you know?
The new bandwagon,
Yeah,
it's
the
gonna
new
disappear in
band,
2
like,
years.
and that's why I'm so careful about my work with Dr. Green. Like, I haven't talked about it at all here yet. But my work with Dr. Green is important, but it's not something that I would ever force on someone. You have to want to do it. And so I think the point is to have teachers talk, right?
I think it's really important to sort of like, all I know is like as a parent, as I was going, I was like, what is, this kid's trying to manipulate me, but she's not, but people are telling me she is, and like even just learning the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown was like, oh, so you change your approach, you like, and then over not too long, it's like, oh, we don't do that anymore, like, it's great.
Yeah.
So it's those little simple kind of things that.
Much of this isn't new, we just can't forget.
Yes.
Yeah.
We try
it's gotta
so
be a
hard to
focus.
fix something that you lose something else. Like Naomi, responsive classroom is amazing.
Yep.
And it still works because things that work forever.
Yep.
They're universal, right? Like Stephen Covey wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He studied 200 years of success literature to write a book, and the reason why that book is still relevant 30 years later, was it 90s?
Yeah.
It's still relevant because it's universally relevant, and what Justin's talking about is universally relevant.
Yes.
I think the question for teachers, and I know we've gotta go in a minute, we're running, quite a bit late, but I would just say this, is that Danielle and I will talk about how to engage teachers and talking to other teachers.
Yes.
I just truly believe that you folks, the ones that are doing this, are the best voice to share the effectiveness with other people, not us, right? Not that we can't help, but we can facilitate it, we can set up meetings, conversations, opportunities. I always like opportunities better than trainings, right? So it's like, this is an opportunity to learn about this and check it out. Way better if we get 20 people that love it, and they do it well, and then other people get curious.
And I think to piggyback on what Tom said too, just take it a step further, like, it's important not to forget, but we often do, because when you are the generation that grew up with it, you don't realize what's going on.
Right.
Right? And so then when you get to that point, and but there's a reason why, like, kids don't parent the way their parents did, right? Like, there are things that work that they don't realize worked, and there are things that didn't work that they don't realize didn't work, and, it's the same thing here with school. Like, there are kids who will experience this, and they'll grow up, and they'll not realize why they had a good school experience.
Right.
Because it's very nuanced. And so it's really easy. We tend to do this in education a lot, because the new generations don't realize what worked, and we're also not good at passing it down. We don't educate the kids on what we're doing and why we're doing it. I think we're getting better at that. But that is a key piece, is we gotta get kids engaging in more metacognition, like, why do you feel safe at school? Why do you feel comfortable at school? What is the teacher doing? We don't think about that stuff enough. Sorry for taking so long.
No, this is great, thank you so much for being so thorough and being so passionate about all this, and like, it's even just walking away feeling like reframing what, like, student achievement or academic success should look and feel like. This feels really amazing, so thanks for this presentation.
Welcome.
And then the for what it's worth department, yes, let K2 just
Stay.
put.
Yeah.
Don't worry, that's, I agree.
Stay put.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
just
what-
can't
They
handle the
can't handle the
transitions, it's
transitions,
little.
they cannot,
No.
it's too much. As a K2 teacher.
I think my teachers will agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
yes, definitely. I know, I saw the kids playing on it when I drove by earlier, and I can attest, at least from the road, they were having a very good time on that playground. It was awesome.
Anybody else have anything else? Anybody in the audience have anything they want to add?
The public.
I mean, public. Okay, well, I think we're gonna do a tour after the meeting, but it is 6:40 and we are adjourned.